by January 21st, yesterday, 90% of resolutions have failed. So I try to always start out with like smoking and drinking and cussing more. So that way by the 21st, I'm a good boy for the rest of the year, and it works out really well. Well, what's the number one resolution that people do? So those are actually going to be kind of what we're going to talk about tonight, because those are the things that I think add to longevity, right? As we can address those. So how about this? Let's do the top 3 causes of death in the United States, because healthier is the one thing, right? So top 3 causes of death. What do you think? Heart attacks. I'm going to go with heart attacks because heart disease is number 1. And that's about 700,000 people per year. Car accidents is down there. It's only like, auto accidents is like 40, I think it was 45,000 is what I looked up this year. So that's usually one that comes up. What else we got? You're stealing all my
about number 3.
good. It is number 3. Okay. Yeah. So number 3 is iatrogenic.
It's scary that it's that high.
It is scary because it's that high. So iatrogenic is a fancy term that means your doctor caused it, right? So it's healthcare error. So medical error is number 3. The number that I used to talk about, we used to do a lot of these classes back before COVID, but then COVID happened and you really couldn't get people to gather. So I had to look up new numbers because I wanted to be up to date with it. So the number I used to promote to people was back in 2010, it was 168,000 people a year die from iatrogenic reactions. And that's funny because that's properly diagnosed, properly prescribed, properly given, and properly taken drugs. So there's really not a medical error in that because it's literally just everything happens the way it's supposed to happen in the system, but yet it still accounts, well, like I said, 168 is what it was. What do you guys think from 2010, up or down? Right. We've had a couple health things go on. So right now, 2016 is the most current that I could find. That was from Johns Hopkins University. And they were saying in 2016, 10 years ago, it was 250,000. So in 6 years, it went from 168 up to 250. I think in another 10 years, it's probably out of control now, right? So iatrogenic or medical error is the third. The second one is cancer, right? And that's about 600,000 people per year. So who wants to do the math for me? 250 divided by 52 weeks in a year. How many people a week die from medical error? Pretty wild. It's like 4,800 people per week. So I think about things and wonder what it takes to get people's attention. You know, you think about the World Trade Center, totally horrific and not cool. 3,000 people, and we were in a war for 20 years. Still in it, right? Still not clear of it. So when you break this down, it's about 4,800 people a week, which is really wild. And that's, again, when you think about medical error or iatrogenic, medical error really isn't the right term, right? Because I told you it was properly diagnosed, prescribed, given, and taken. This isn't, oh, we left a sponge in you at a surgery, and that's medical error, right? That's, oh, we screwed up. So the number is actually even higher than that. But it's interesting to look at it like this. So 4,800 people per week with medical error. How about this one? I think is another interesting statistic. We probably already all know it, but this is interesting. As far as industrialized countries that line up similar to us, where do you think the U.S. ranks in the top 38 countries in the world?
The worst.
The worst? Well, we're not at 38. You're a pessimist, Ann. You shouldn't be a pessimist. We're slightly better than that. Out of 38, we're 34th, right? It's pretty wild. So 72 is the average lifespan here. A place like New Zealand, it's 85. And that's wild, you know? So I think all of this kind of paints a picture. And my point with all of this is that the system is definitely broken and doesn't have a lot of emphasis on actually addressing issues and figuring things out on lifestyle. Because 80% of healthcare costs go to treat chronic diseases. And that same 80% is interesting because 80% of chronic disease are lifestyle induced. So when you look at definitely these two up here, for sure, heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, all of that, that's all lifestyle induced. So Harvard did a study and they said less than 3% of the US population has proper weight management, exercises, has a good diet, and doesn't smoke. Less than 3% of the US population, which is pretty wild. So I think it points to a lot of things being, if we can stay off drugs, if we can keep our body clean, and we can do things that make our heart healthy, right? Then that prevents a whole lot of these errors. So you guys are all, except for you, what's your name? I'm sorry. Sharon, you're the only one I can pick on because I know everybody else. So, so when we look at this, Sharon, it speaks to what we can do, right? And one thing that I teach in my practice that hopefully everybody knows is the 3 T's. The 3 T's are a way that we can work in order to prepare our body to be highly adaptable, because that's really what it is when stress comes at us, we want to be able to adapt. So 3 T's, Harmony, do you know the 3 T's? Totally put you on the spot. What are they? Toxins. Thoughts. Trauma.
Good thing you knew that.
That was good, yeah. I actually say I'm the opposite: trauma, toxins, and thoughts, but I'll give you 100 points for that. That's good. So, there's a lot of things like with chiropractic, it makes a whole lot of sense on the trauma side. If we go out here and, we get in a car accident tomorrow when it's snowing, we know how car accidents go, right? And we know that we need a lot of work to get through that. It's a momentary thing that happens. It's a whole lot of force in a little bit of time that affects and changes your nerve system. I'm going to do a big picture thing here real quick. All of these, right, are stress, okay? And it's how your body adapts to the stress. So when we have physical pressure on a nerve, that causes stress in the system. So if we have something like a brain and a spinal cord coming down and nerve roots going out to organs, cells, or tissues, one thing that's interesting is when the nerve gets pinched. Harmony's gonna be mad if I didn't use my other pen. If the nerve gets pinched here, this whole line now becomes excitatory for a little while. So it gets excited and goes into a sympathetic or a fight or flight response. So the end organ, cell, or tissue downstream from that pinched nerve now functions as if we're being chased by a tiger in a stress response. So over time, that causes that tissue to wear down, to break down, to decay faster, to wear out faster, and then we get dysfunction in that tissue. Now, there's one spot in the whole nerve system called the upper cervical, the first bone in the neck, your atlas bone. When that one's off, this one's wild because this one controls the sympathetic and parasympathetic tone of the whole body. So when your atlas goes out of place, what happens is the entire system now is in a sympathetic overload. So you get people, and it's not every situation, but anxiety disorders, a lot of time it can be remedied by adjusting the atlas and taking pressure off the brainstem so the whole body's tone settles down. And that's how trauma can affect it, is by sending everything into a sympathetic or a fight or flight overload. We'll go to toxins next because I think that's a really important one with what we deal with in our culture now. Toxins aren't necessarily like, if I go eat a cheeseburger, that's going to make my back go out of place. That's not how it works, right? This is all dealing with the stress of the overall system. And so what we want to do is be able to get the toxins out of our system, right? So if we put them in, we're all taking in toxins. You guys have been to Lowe's before and they talk about paint with low volatile organic compounds or low VOCs. It means we're sitting in a room that's coated in plastic right now, giving off plastic molecules, and we're breathing them in. The carpet does it, the paint does it, the whole room is pretty much coated in plastic, which is rather weird, I think. But I don't know. The toxins and getting those out of your system is the big thing. I know some of you guys, we've talked about it before, but the term methylation, anybody familiar, not familiar with that?
Detox pathways.
Detox pathways. That's right. So methylation is one of the main ways that your body detoxifies. So you have B12 is a really key chemical that we can put into our body. And we've all heard of B12. It has to do with blood production. It has to do with energy production. But B12 has this pathway that it goes down and it eventually turns into what's called glutathione. And glutathione is the best antioxidant that your body can make. So if you look at vitamin C is the best extracellular outside the body antioxidant that you can make and bring in. Glutathione is the best thing that your body can make. So this process called methylation is turning, I can get real deep on it, but this is turning B12 into methyl B12. And once it's methylated, then you can make glutathione. But it's not just glutathione. There's a whole lot that this thing does. When we start with B12 will give, let's do it like this. As it goes to glutathione, we have a lot of other reactions that happen. So first, it spins off and makes a form called adenosyl B12. And that's one of the fuel sources that your cells make for energy. So if we don't make this, we're going to end up with chronic fatigue, low energy. After that happens, in our liver is where methylation takes place. And you know your thyroid produces what's called T4. and then it gets converted to T3 in the liver, and that's what turns your cells on and makes them have energy in order to produce this. So your thyroid function is directly related to methylation, and they say that 80% of T3 is made in the liver through methylation. Only about 20% is made in your thyroid. So if you have thyroid dysfunction and you take the drugs, and the drugs don't work, and then you go have the thyroid, cut on or surgery, that's only about 20%. In fact, if you take Synthroid or thyroxine and your problem is methylation, then you're not going to actually, the 20% that your thyroid makes will actually just stop working because the synthetic takes it over. So methylation, we'll keep going with this. So after the thyroid, then it spins off and it makes a chemical called SAMe. And SAMe is the base for every neurotransmitter found in your brain. So there's chemical imbalance in brain chemistry. It spins off and stabilizes enzymes that control your heart and are key indicators for cardiovascular hypertension and heart disease, a chemical called homocysteine that your body makes. And without methylation, you can't take the homocysteine out of your system. If you can get it out of the system, then it turns into NAC, which I don't know if you guys remember that from COVID, but NAC was a big one that a lot of people took to boost their immune response because that's the driver for the immune system. It's actually a binder that will take toxins out of your system as well. So some people that need to get things out and can't detoxify, I think I probably have NAC over there on the counter, and that helps it. If you've got a kid at home going through puberty and they're suffering from acne, get them on NAC and you'll see that stuff clear right up. Because it's a detox pathway that could be broken or altered or not functioning correctly in a kiddo, and you put NAC in and man, it clears their skin right up. It's pretty cool. Also is really great with hormone balance and all kinds of stuff. So then eventually NAC will turn into glutathione, all because of methylation. So if we look at just one chemical to put into the body, there's a lot we can talk about. Vitamin D does a lot of this type of stuff. There's a whole lot that do really amazing thing. But just this one, check this out. This is chronic fatigue. You can also go fibromyalgia with this. Thyroid issues, brain chemistry issues, heart issues, immune system, and detoxification or cancer pathways.
Are there any cofactors that the B12 needs to do all this?
If you put raw B12 in, no. Well, it depends. It depends. Some of these produce what's called methyl donors, which are kind of spinoffs. And so like this stands for S-adenosyl methionine. So methionine is, I think spelled like that. Methionine is a really great one. Methionine is a chemical that your brain makes. Again, that's one of the main precursors. So a form of B12, this adenosyl B12 is this one, plus methionine, which is a methyl donor. And so if we can make that, this one's really cool. This is another thing on here I didn't even mention, but with brain chemistry, ADD and ADHD is due to a deficiency in methionine.
Because I knew you mentioned neurotransmitters.
Mm-hmm. So what methionine does, which is, I think, really interesting. So when you rest at night, your body charges up with energy, right? Your brain has activity in it. As your body drains its energy throughout the day, methionine's released or created, and it lowers your brain activity. So when you hit the pillow at night, your brain is fatigued and your body's fatigued, okay? If we can't methylate and we can't make methionine, then the brain stays hyperactive. And we've all had those nights before where you like get into bed and your brain's going 100 miles an hour. If it's once in a while, that's not that big of a deal. But if it's every single night, it's a pretty good idea to take methionine. Because what happens is the brain doesn't calm down. So that means you get kind of crappy rest and you don't recover from whatever you did that day. So you wake up the next day and your body's fatigued, but your brain's hyperactive, and that discombobulation of it creates what they call attention deficit hyperactive disorder. So what's the answer? Give the kids speed and boost their body up to match an overactive brain. And that's kind of dumb, I think, because you could just give them methionine. But the problem is methione's $20 or something like that for a month's supply. It's not $600 or $10,000 or whatever insurance charges for Adderall. Adults can use coffee, right, and caffeine. So if you're heavy into caffeine, that could be a sign that we have some methionine issues. The other thing that I think is neat about methionine, I'm sorry to go down a lot of rabbit holes with this, but methionine actually unbinds dopamine from receptors. So if you are a person that has an opioid addiction, or really there's a lot of things. I mean, dopamine is the main pleasure thing that chemical that your body makes. So it doesn't even have to be opioids. It just binds to dopamine receptors in there. So what makes sense to me is that if we are deficient in methionine, then we're not going to release things. So that means the next time we consume, let's say we have, like cheese is actually an interesting one. Cheese binds to dopamine receptors. So, and I'm going to pick cheese because it's kind of funny to think about a cheese addiction. But my daughter Lucy, I'm pretty positive has a cheese addiction because she freaks out around it. And if she didn't get it when she was young, she would make a big stink about it. And it makes sense because I'm just going to make it really simplistic. 1 cube of cheese, right, fills your dopamine receptor. But if you can't make methionine, then you're not going to release that dopamine from there. So the next time you have cheese, like, well, I probably need 2. Well, maybe I need 5 now, and maybe I need 30, right? And I'm not saying a cheese addiction turns into a meth addiction, but you can kind of see where some of this stuff goes. So I use methionine for a lot of things in my practice because if you have people that are trying to quit smoking or trying to get into a healthy pattern or healthy rhythm, sometimes they can't break those addictions because their dopamine won't release and they don't go back down to just 1 piece of cheese is good enough. So yes, there are cofactors that go along. B6 is probably one of the biggest cofactors. Without B6, your body won't convert NAC into glutathione. It won't convert homocysteine into NAC. B6 has a lot of enzymatic reactions where it helps other things kind of process. So we can see toxins are a big deal, right? If we can't get it out, and this is just one way to do it, is to bind it up. But man, if you don't even go with the toxins and look at this, this is about maybe 80% of what people go to the doctor for. They go because they have low energy and they have pain, their thyroid doesn't work, chemical imbalances, heart problems, immune system issues, and detoxification. So I think taking a multivitamin that's pre-methylated is probably one of the most important things that you can do for your overall health and health in the kids, right? Because if they can't methylate. So there's a test that you can do with this. I probably should have led with this. It looks like I'm writing a bad word and I'm not. It's called MTHFR.
That's a bad word.
It's not a bad word. It stands for methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase, and it's an enzyme reaction that happens to convert B12 into methylated B12. So on any multivitamin, if you guys are taking multivitamins, look on there and make sure it says methylcobalamin. And the funny joke is it's the only time I'm ever going to tell you to take meth, right? So it's what it is. But you want to have pre-methylated B vitamins. So it's funny because Harmony can get you set up and we can do a test to see how well you methylate. But the reality is you start taking a methylated B12 and if your life changes, it probably means you're horrible at methylating, right? Because it's that dramatic of a boost. You go from no energy to like, wow, I feel good now, you know? You see yourself shift and you also have $500 in your pocket because you didn't do the test. So yeah, go for it.
It's a little bit of a rabbit trail.
Okay.
But okay, so I'm relating to what you said, your body, ready to sleep, but your mind still.
Mm-hmm.
That happens to me. Okay, so why if I am in that situation and I take GABA,
Mm-hmm.
why does that help?
GABA calms the brain down. GABA is a neurotransmitter that calms the brain down.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's also a prescription called gabapentin.
Well, yeah.
And that really calms you down. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. A lot of things, right, are natural substances that you can't patent natural substances if you're big pharma. So you make a synthetic version of it and you switch it a little bit and you make it overpowered, And sometimes if it's not strong enough, then you'll do more. So like Vicodin is a really good example. Vicodin was a pretty nasty one for a while. Vicodin, I don't know really how to spell, IN maybe. Vicodin is 6, Roman numeral 6, right, VI, is 6 times a regular codeine. That's all Vicodin is. So 5 times wasn't cool, 3 times wasn't good enough. Let's make it 6 times and let's call it Vicodin, and that'll really get you loopy and hide your pain or cover things up. So a lot of pharmaceuticals are like that. We have a supplement that we use in here a lot for digestive issues, for glucose regulation, for diabetes, to heal leaky gut syndrome. There's a lot of great things that berberine does. And berberine is the natural and metformin is the synthetic, right? So you can have somebody on metformin and you can switch it to berberine and it literally does the same thing, except for berberine will heal leaky gut syndrome and stabilize liver enzymes where metformin does the opposite on both of those. So we've talked about trauma, which is really easy with chiropractic and understanding that. When we have trauma in the body, it pinches the nerve and the nerve gets excited and then it stays in an excited state. So it overproduces hormones, overcontracts, overstimulated. So we're just talking about what's toxins and some of the detoxification pathways. So essentially as we take in a bunch of junk, can we get it out of our body? And the main pathway to do that is making this substance called glutathione. So thoughts are the next one here. So let's jump into thoughts. Thoughts are another way just to say stress. So we've all seen commercials over probably the last 15 or 20 years that talk about stress. What's the main stress hormone that the body releases? Anybody know? Cortisol. Who said that? Anne? Great. So cortisol has been labeled and demonized as this stress hormone. And if you guys remember the old commercials back from the 2000s with Cortislim, it was this substance, and I don't know, whatever, it was a chemical that was designed to help metabolize cortisol. And the one phrase that I remember very distinctly from that commercial is that cortisol produces truncal obesity. So when you have the fat storage around the waist, maybe not in the legs or in the arms, but more in the trunk. And cortisol has been pinned as being that number one thing. So when you think about that implies that the body doesn't know how to regulate itself and that it doesn't know what to do with it. Cortisol is an interesting one. So we talked about metformin, right, with being able to help regulate blood glucose and the berberine doing the same thing. When we have insulin, insulin allows uptake of glucose into the body cells. Cortisol's main job is to do that under periods of stress. So when we get into that sympathetic dominance or sympathetic overload, what happens is our body will release cortisol, and cortisol will help bring glucose into the muscles in times of stress. So let's go over to the zoo and let's walk around, probably not tomorrow or Saturday, but let's walk around on a nice day and we can have the most beautiful day and the best weather. And when they come on the radio or on the speakers and they say, hey, we hope everybody's having fun, but just to let you know, one of the Bengal tigers just got out. What's going to happen to our body response? Stressed, or we're going to chill out? We're going to stress, right? As long as I can run faster than one of you, I'm happy, right? And so that's all we need to do. But in that moment, think about this. Our blood pressure spikes, our cortisol gets released, our body is preparing to increase our glucose delivery system to our muscles so we can get the heck out of there and run. That makes total sense. What's funny is if you had a blood pressure cuff on me and you were like, Ryan, your blood pressure's a little high right now. Maybe you should take these pills. I'd slap them out of your hand and I'd be like, no, I'm running from a tiger. I want my blood pressure up. I want my heart rate up. And that makes sense because we can sense the visible threat. But now let's take it to thoughts and let's go to our cubicle and our spreadsheets and whatever else we get locked up in life that are sedentary, which is where a lot of our stress comes from. None of us are out there fighting bears every day and trying to run away from threats. Our threats are usually on our phones or in our families or workplace stress, environmental stress. And so when your body is in these states of stress, the cortisol gets released. And if I'm not actively running or needing to get away to get glucose into my muscles, where does it go? Fat cells uptake it. So that way my body can say, you know what? I can't use it right now. My muscle can't eat this and drink this right now. So let's just put it in the fridge for later. And it stores it in fat cells. So the Cortislim commercial wasn't wrong. It just was demonizing it to say it was a bad thing. So when you're in a state of stress, what should you do? Go move your body. Go run, go exercise, go move your body and let that glucose get uptaken into the muscles where it should be. Or the other thing you can do is take supplements to increase your body's ability to process stress. So something like magnesium does that. This is an interesting one. Your body will, when cortisol goes up, your body will use magnesium to bring it back down. So magnesium works as a buffer to bring cortisol levels down. Not to try to call anybody out, but who takes magnesium in here?
There's about 40 different magnesiums, though.
There is a lot of different. What type do you take? Different ones? Yeah. That's good to know that there's 40 different types.
Well, I mean,
no, there's a lot.
No, there's a lot.
And each one has a different effect. So the cheapest one, and yeah, glycinate's a great one. Magnesium citrate is the cheapest and most abundant one. So it does some good for the body. It works like an electrolyte for replenishing what comes out in sweat. Magnesium citrate is really good if your gut is slow in motility. You can get it powder or capsulized, yeah. But if you take a bunch of it, you'll be spending some time in the bathroom, which if that's the desired effect, that's great. there's other versions that work better, right? Ozonated magnesium oxide is one that we have it over in a jar called oxy powder. Man, you got some constipation, that'll get things moving. It's a great product, right? It's a really great cleanse. So ozonated magnesium oxide and magnesium citrate are really great for digestive issues. You mentioned glycinate. Glycinate's really good for the stress response. It's good for cardiovascular health, and it does pretty well with musculoskeletal. Magnesium malate is the best for musculoskeletal aches and pains, and it also it mixes with that B12 for cellular energy. So if you're feeling kind of low and crummy, B12 and some mag malate, that will get your cells to uptake and create a lot more energy. What's the other one, Harmony? You have magnesium threonate, which is really great for the brain. It crosses the blood-brain barrier, and I have several patients that are off of their anti-anxieties and all of that because they take that stuff, and they say that actually feels not like a Vicodin, but like a Valium, right? Because it chills you right out if you got a big stress response going on in your brain. So your body will use magnesium. It'll pull it from your blood supply. And if that's deficient, then it pulls it from the bones because your bones are your storage centers for all your minerals. So as we age and we look at like demineralization issues in bones, calcium usually has the spotlight on it, but there's a lot of minerals that make our bones up. So chronic states of stress decreases your levels of mag in your body. And since magnesium is so important, what do you think happens when magnesium levels get low? You feel like, yeah. When magnesium levels get low, it's a state of stress because it needs it, it's essential, and that causes it to release more cortisol. So chronic states of stress not only decrease the magnesium, but it also perpetuates, right? And these things just keep going around in circle. It's like a negative feedback loop that the body can get into. So we'll put people on magnesium in the practice, and it's like overnight, like a game changer. It's really great. So the number one, just with chiropractic that I usually do, and we usually always carry it, we carry the magnesium malate and we carry the glycinate. So both of them can work well for people. That's great to bring that up because there are a lot of good different versions of it. So I'm going to go to kind of a big picture. You guys all know me and know what my family's walked through in the last 5-6 years, right, with Denise and everything that we did. So I want to show you kind of one of the biggest breakthroughs that I think as all of this ties together. Is we'll get a little bit deep with some cell physiology, but I want you to see it because this whole stress response that we're dealing with is absolutely the key to longevity, in my opinion. So we talked about the methylation, and we talked about T4 and T3. So we'll have some fun with this and see. So we have a brain and spinal cord. Your pituitary gland in there releases a chemical called TSH. That goes to your thyroid. I'm going to make it look like a butterfly because I think that always looks like that. That stimulates the thyroid to produce T4, okay? Now T4 is interesting because it has iodines, 4 of them, that's why it's T4, in this arrangement. As the T4 goes to the liver, if you guys didn't know, that's what a liver looks like. As it goes to the liver here, in case we get mixed up here, that will convert, like I said, 80% of the T4 into T3. And what happens is that this molecule will cleave or shave off one of the iodines. Okay, so now this iodine is missing, and that's what makes T3. T3 will go on into a cell. Don't be confused with the liver, but this is what a cell looks like because it's 3D. And it has a receptor on the top, and the T3 will plug directly into that, and that's what turns on the power in the cell. Okay? So the cell will then start using those chemicals like we talked about, like magnesium and B12, and it will start pulling those in order to produce, and glucose, excuse me. These will produce 1 unit of glucose, and everything else will produce 36 units of ATP. I told you that form of B12 was adenylyl B12. That's where this one comes in. Adenylyl triphosphate is the name of this. And that's a highly efficient cell that's working correctly. Okay? It uses a process called the aerobic respiration. So if we go out and we do aerobics, easy way to remember this is when we do, what jazzercise is in my head right now, but when we go do jazzercise, we're going to be doing an aerobic activity. We're going to be huffing and puffing, right? We're taking in lots of oxygen and breathing hard. Running's an aerobic activity. Everything endurance-based is aerobic activity because we're using oxygen, the presence of oxygen, mixed into all of these other things in order to get the bang and produce ATP in the situation. So that's how our cells normally function. When we get into chronic states of stress, and when I say stress, I mean infection, inflammation, starvation, and it's not like you haven't eaten in 4 days, but when we eat things that are nutrient deficient, say like McDonald's, right? We're not getting any nutrients from it. I mean, there's some, but it's not like what you would get if you're eating, a clean organic meal, right? A whole foods meal. So your body goes into nutrient deficiency, and that's a form of starvation. So infection, inflammation, starvation. There's a couple other I'm blanking on, but you get the point here, right? Inflammation is chronic nerve pressure. Infection's easy. Starvation, nutrient deficiency. There's a couple other, and they'll come to me. When we get into these chronically, this is the wildest thing that I can see in the body is instead of making T3, which we want, the body will spin it off and it will make reverse T3. So reverse T3 is funny because just like this iodine came off, now in reverse T3, we're going to have our iodines, but instead of this one, now we're missing this guy here. This may all be like, okay, what in the world? Why does this matter? This matters because as reverse T3 goes to plug into the nucleus, the nucleus of the cell will accept it in the receptor because it looks the same. It's got the right key to fit into the door, but it has 0 power to turn. It doesn't have the right combination. So what it does is it binds up the cell, and now the cell can't produce energy through aerobic respiration, and it does what's called anaerobic. Anaerobic, all the same things go in, but instead of using the mitochondria, which I don't know if you guys remember that term from high school biology, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It's what makes all the energy. If we can't use the mitochondria, what happens is the cell starts to do fermentation, and it starts to make the sugars, just like alcohol does, how it ferments. It will actually produce energy, but instead of 36 units, it produces 2 units of ATP. We can see how that's a big problem because it needs this much, and it's only producing this much. So what the next thing is that the body will do is it will say, cool, let's just grow more receptors, more glucose receptors. And so it can grow up to 9 times the amount of receptors, which means it's a resource hog and sucking in the glucose that was designed to be spread out over multiple cells. Like at the end of the day, your phone, you've been on it all day, you get the indication that you're running low on battery, so you switch it on low power mode. You all familiar with that? Low power mode limits the amount of things your phone does automatically. It chops it down to a lesser version. This is the same type of thing. The cell's still active and still working, but it's making energy at a way less efficient mode. So what it does is it mutates and it starts to gain more cells. And that is the first step going from aerobic respiration to anaerobic respiration. That's the first step in creating cancer. It's the first thing that happens. It's called the Warburg effect. Otto von Warburg was a scientist and he figured all of this out. So a lot of what you do when you try to go into an anti-cancer protocol is you try to create what's called a reverse Warburg. So you do things that switch the body from the anaerobic back to the aerobic respiration and get it back into a healthy rhythm. That's all great in theory. That's really hard to do. So when we talk about longevity, I think, in my opinion, it makes way more sense putting the emphasis on the front side. Jim, we talked about some of the factors of why this is important before you guys got here. We talked about the U.S. is ranked 34th out of 38 industrialized countries in overall health. Our life expectancy is way less than industrialized countries. And the third leading cause of death being medical error. So kind of sets the stage for why we're going down this pathway. 80%, I think I said this earlier, but 80% of all healthcare dollars go to treat chronic diseases, and less than 3% of healthcare dollars go for preventative. So when we look at something like this, and the reason why I wanted to have you guys here tonight and talk about this is if we can find ways to reduce the stressors in our life, then that has to produce more longevity because we take this stress out of the system and we keep everything functioning in the aerobic style. So good nutrition, exercise, limiting bad factors like toxins that we put into the body, alcohol, smoking, all of those things, that drastically decreases the amount of stress. We take supplements that help us methylate, that help us heal and help us repair and restore. We get adjusted, we exercise. I know it sounds really simple to say, right? But those are the keys. If we want to live a long, healthy life, we figure out how to get the toxins out, we figure out how to move our body, and we make sure that our mental stress, as best you can, is within bounds. I mentioned some supplements, and I'll throw this out there. I went down the magnesium pathway. You guys heard of adaptogens before? So reishi mushrooms are an adaptogenic herb. You have ashwagandha. You have a lot of these things. Really, how these work is like this. If your stress response is in this realm, and we have a stressor that comes in, and we start to think about like dropping a rock into a still lake, right? The ripples go out. And if they stay within those confines, we're cool. But when the big stress hits, and we don't have the ability to adapt, then we go outside, and this is where we have the major stress events in our life. So using adaptogenic herbs like ashwagandha and reishi and even magnesium, if we put vitamin C in, we know that it's going to be an antioxidant. When you put reishi mushrooms in, it's not necessarily that you get a desired effect from it. That's not what you're going for. You're going for the adaptogenic side, so it widens this and it spreads this out. So now our threshold, our bandwidth, is a lot more. And when we have a higher bandwidth, we can process stress and deal with stress before we go into the danger zone of where it affects our body into these methods like we talked about. Make sense? Clear as biochemistry?
I never knew how adaptogens work.
Yeah, that's the key with it right there. That's the simplest explanation, is it increases your bandwidth. So when you have major stress events in life, it doesn't derail you, right? It doesn't throw you into the anaerobic cycle. It's okay to go into the anaerobic. Our bodies were designed to do it. It's just, are we limiting the amount of stressors so that our reverse T3 levels go down? Once we get out of the stress, our body stops synthesizing reverse T3 and makes T3 again, and then the cell functions correctly.
And it's all back related to the thyroid.
It's all related to methylation. The thyroid's...
What if you don't have a thyroid?
Well, I'm sorry. No, I'm just teaching you.
Yeah, I mean,
There's a field out back. We're going to go back there. We'll put you down. It'll be all right. No. If you don't have a thyroid, it shows. When you walked in, I had a kind of a thing up here that talked about how B12 works in your system. If you don't have a thyroid, if you have thyroid dysfunction, it's a pretty good indication that your body can't methylate and your detox pathways aren't working correctly. That's one of the number one things. Nerve interference at C6, C7 level goes to power the thyroid. Those would be the places that I would check if somebody came in and said, hey, my thyroid's dysfunctional. There's a bunch of different conditions that thyroids can be in. You have hypo and hyper, you have Hashimoto's, and all of them are difficult, but you can manage them. We can try to manage them. Try to do the best thing. So, it's funny with Denise's journey. I learned this little bit from one book, and I learned this from another book, and I learned this from another thing, and it starts to become a really clear picture, right? That if we can limit the amount of stress in our body and do things that are proactive, then that has to give us the best outcomes. Dr. Dan and I were talking before we came back here about how the body can signal and tell you things are maybe dysfunctional or wrong, and how it can lead you to move into healthier lifestyles and healthier activities. And I totally believe that your innate ability of your body will tell you when things are off. And if you listen, you'll understand that, hey, the thyroid's not functioning. And I'm not criticizing anybody who has thyroid, who has had a thyrectomy or anything like that to take the thyroid out. It's just, if we can recognize the dysfunction, then that's the way we fix it. And my opinion, is not cutting it out, right? It makes sense to address the dysfunction first. But sometimes when things go on and on and on and on, it gets to a point where it's too far, and that's the best answer. So I'm not against drugs and surgery, but I think the big picture is, can we do it on the front side so we don't have to get to the back side?
so the drugs that they prescribe for that, when it's gone,
Mhm.
it's out, how does that affect the difference between that T4 and that T3?
So when you put in like thyroxine or Synthroid, usually those are T4 that go in. It's usually synthetic T4, so your body will still be able to split those into those two. So you can do blood tests to look at reverse T3. This one's weird. You can't do it at LabCorp. You can get the blood drawn and get it ordered. But to my knowledge, every reverse T3 has to go to Minnesota to Mayo, and that's where they process it. So it's an interesting one. I do believe, and I've presented this at chiropractic conferences, in the past that if we could look at reverse T3 as an indicator for overall systemic dysfunction, I think we'd have a really good indicator for the amount of metabolic stress in our lives. I think you could probably say it with inflammatory responses from the body. If you could watch it and be on it enough, you could probably see how the effects of just inflammation alone, because if we can track this, if we can understand how this works, then we see what cycle we're in down here and we can see how it goes. There's a ratio between T3 and reverse T3 on knowing if you're in a safe zone or if you're overloaded and all that stuff. There's indications with that. You know, maybe to answer your question, Jim, if what do you do? Man, I would make sure that I'm taking the right supplements. I make sure that I'm taking enough B12 for my body to process this and do all this, because that's the other thing too. If we're deficient in magnesium, this process isn't working. If we're deficient in B12, this process isn't working correctly. And then by default, we have to go here. That's the safety of this, is that we have a backup system. We just don't want to run our whole lives in the backup system, because that's, like I said, that's what perpetuates mutations. So it's interesting. The Warburg effect is the first thing. The second thing that happens is to get your body to inhibit spontaneous cell death, called apoptosis. If your body can sense that these cells are in this state, the central nervous system can say, hey, you know what? You get out of here, right? And it'll kill it. That's how it should work. But the second thing that happens, we go from aerobic to respiration. There's a gene called P53. And P53 is the one that will be used by the brain to tell that cell to die. And crafty enough, when things get stuck in this mode, P53 gets mutated and gets deleted. So the cell can't go into spontaneous cell death. Does anybody fast? Do any fasting? Fasting's super, super important. There's a lot of different ways to fast. You can do lengths of time, so 3 days, 7 days, 2 days. You can do a prolonged fast like that. You can do intermittent fasting. So, for instance, I will eat dinner tonight, and then I won't eat anything until about 2 o'clock tomorrow. So tonight's a little bit different because we're here hanging out. But typically, if I eat dinner at 7:30, and I don't eat until 2 o'clock tomorrow, that's usually about 18 and 6 is what it is. So 18 hours of fasting, and then 6 hours of consuming. So from 2 to 8 is kind of when I eat. I'll go to lunch at 2 and I get off work and I eat, and then I don't eat anything until the next day. You can have black coffee and water and green tea if you want to, but you don't do anything that puts any sugar or really anything into the body, because it causes a glucose spike and you break your fast. When you do fasting, talked about apoptosis here, there's another form of cell death that happens called autophagy. And that is a really neat thing that your body will look and it'll say, okay, who's being efficient? And so it looks through efficiency to see if your body's in this state or in this state. If it's in this state, it'll kill it through autophagy. So fasting will initiate cleansing of the cells, cleansing of the body. And I think that's something that everybody should be doing. Interesting enough, Jesus said, he was talking to his disciples and he said, and when you fast, right? Don't show it on your face. Don't get the accolades right for it. But it's interesting. He didn't say if you fast. He says, and when you fast. So if that guy says to do it, I probably should do it, right? I mean, that's kind of a good indicator for me. So there's a lot of ways that we can get some of these things to straighten out. But again, why deal with it on the back side of the problem when we could address it on the front side of the problem? Let me pause there. Any questions? Any thoughts?
Well,
Terry, you got something. You've been taking notes.
You didn't talk about adrenal fatigue from excess cortisol.
That happens as well. If you're stuck in chronic states of stress, then your body will, your cortisol levels can be super, super high because it's like a sponge and it's just wringing it out. And if you don't allow the adrenals, like anything, if you don't allow any of it to rest, then it won't heal and won't recover. So much like the gut, right? So fasting, I had this conversation with a guy today. We were talking about the hours that he consumes and what he consumes. So carbohydrates and proteins take 4 hours to process. Fat takes 9 hours. So if I eat dinner, let's say I eat a late dinner tonight at 9 o'clock, and I have something that's a well-balanced meal, right? My body will first go for the simple sugars. So if I have, if I have syrup on a pancake, right? It's going to go for that sugar first. And once the sugar flashes through the system, it'll burn up real quick and get the blood sugar to spike up. And then the body will start to process the carbohydrates next. And after that, then it moves on to the proteins. And then once that's done, it'll process the fat. So you can have a diet that is seemingly healthy, but we don't give our gut any time to rest in there. And so what you can do, let's say we go home and eat a steak with a baked potato and a salad. So we've got some carbohydrates from the potato. We've got a dressing that has some sugar in it from the salad. Vegetables and fruits usually process in about 30 minutes. So those are a lot cleaner for your body to process and get through. But then we have the steak and the gristle, right, the fat. And so now what we've done is we've set ourselves up to where we have a short period of time for instant sugars, carbohydrates, proteins, which can take up to 8 hours to process those, plus 9 for fats. So now we're stretching ourselves way into tomorrow. And if we get up and eat breakfast at 6 or 7, like this guy was telling me, he's not even done processing his evening food, right? So his gut stays active all day, always moving, always going. If we go to the YMCA, which is behind the building, not a field, that's the other office. Don't come back over there, right? If we go to the Y and we work out, and let's say we lift really, really hard and strain our muscles, we all know the best thing is to rest it, right? We're going to rest the muscle, and I'm not going to push my muscles anymore because that will cause extra strain and it won't heal. But we don't think about that with the gut. If we let the gut rest through fasting, then it actually decreases inflammation, increases, right, the autophagy on here, and it allows the gut to heal and recover and rest appropriately. So the adrenal fatigue is true. I mean, it's actually a really good thing to bring up because it's not just true with the adrenal glands. It's true with all systems of the body that we need time for it to and rest and chill and recover. Sleeping's like that. You have your stages of sleep. First 3 stages, your postural control muscles are activated. When you get into REM sleep, REM stands for rapid eye movement. And rapid eye movement means that your brain is producing melatonin. And one derivative of melatonin is a chemical called DMT, which causes your dreams. So when you're in a dream state, your brain has cued that up so that your body can rest and recover. In stage 4, when you have rapid eye movement, that's where your postural muscles shut off. We've all slept maybe 3-4 hours in a night or 5 hours in a night. You wake up, you're like, oh man, I'm like, my muscles kind of burn and I'm kind of stiff. It's because you didn't achieve REM sleep and you didn't get to that level where things actually healed and repaired. So posturally, it's kind of interesting because if you sleep on your stomach and you're in REM sleep and now your postural control muscles shut off, what happens is you end up falling into a deeper stretch. You stretch out all the muscles and ligaments on this side. And when you get up in the day, now we have instability on this side of the neck. And it can cause subluxation to happen, misalignments that put pressure on the nerve. So yeah, adrenal fatigue is where I was going with that. Any other thoughts?
You mentioned methyl donor.
Mm-hmm.
How about the drug methadone? Is that the same thing?
Methadone is a synthetic heroin, and so it's an opioid. It's a synthetic opioid, and so it's used in order to get people off heroin addictions, but it still fills the same sites. So different than methadone and methyl donor. Methyl donors are like, actually, methionine's a big methyl donor. NAC is a methyl donor. Methyl donors are the spin-offs that happen through the methylation cycle that are byproducts that your body can use. When I was in school, I learned there's a chemical called homocysteine. And homocysteine was the lab test that you run when you suspect that there's cardiac muscle damage. Because what they would do is you go in for a heart attack and you run your blood chemistry, you'd have these super high levels of homocysteine in the system. Okay, so 20 years ago when I was in school, it was like, oh, well, that's the thing that gets released when you have heart damage. Well, we now know that's not true. Homocysteine comes from regular cellular metabolism. It's a waste product. It's released in tiny, tiny amounts from every cell. So if you have homocysteine going into the system, but we don't have a methyl donor called trimethylglycine. So you have homocysteine. If we don't have trimethylglycine takes homocysteine and turns it into NAC. That's how we get NAC, is from taking a waste product, something that is actually stressful in the body, with a methyl donor called trimethylglycine, and it turns it into N-acetylcysteine, which is great. That's your immune system. What homocysteine does, if we don't have TMG in the body, homocysteine is an irritant to blood vessel walls and causes constriction. So constriction of vessels is a pretty big deal because when you get to the anterior circumflex artery on the heart, the widowmaker, If that thing gets tighter and tighter and tighter, that's what we call a heart attack, is because we then become ischemic in the cells. We don't have enough oxygen getting to that tissue, and the tissue then goes into an infarction, right? So if there's an estimate right now, and this is one beautiful thing with AI that they can see, is looking at healthcare records and lab work and all of that stuff. They estimate that 80% of high blood pressure comes from an inability to create trimethylglycine,
Because there's so much.
because there's a buildup of homocysteine in the system, right? So homocysteine keeps building and building and building, and if you can't metabolize it out, then you start to get constriction of the vessels. There's other things that you can do, like you can take, there's an amino acid called arginine that causes, arginine will convert into nitric oxide, and then it'll cause dilation of the vessels. You can do that. You can take cordyceps mushrooms, it causes vasodilation. You can do a handful of things that will cause vasodilation, which means it opens it up. But if you're not taking care of the homocysteine buildup in there, as soon as that effect wears off of that substance, right back down to tightening down.
Yeah, trying to get to the root cause.
You get to the root cause. So one thing that I think is really important is, remember we talked about that SAMe, the basis for every neurotransmitter in the brain? We can order a bottle of SAMe and it's like $90. Or we can buy methionine, which is like 15 to 20. And as long as we have B12 in our system and we've got methionine, our body will put those two together and make SAMe. So it is about finding the root cause. And to me, one of the main things that I do with supplementation is, let's get down to the most basic level so we can take these building blocks and then let the body do what it wants to, because the intelligence of the body knows far more than I know.
Okay, I'm gonna ask this question. Just to take glutathione as a supplement, I understand that that's pretty hard to process and really do yourself much good. Is that correct?
You'll do good with glutathione, but
Taking it.
the hard part is because it's an antioxidant, it's the most powerful antioxidant your body can make. When you take it and it hits something like your stomach acid will bind up all those antioxidant properties, because acid is going to be an oxidative stress on the body. So what happens is when you take glutathione orally, you end up getting, so if you were to infuse glutathione or vitamin C, right, into the blood, you nearly get 100% of what's in the bag into the system, right? When you take glutathione or even vitamin C, because they have similar features of antioxidative properties, you'll get about 40% from the supplement amount into the blood supply.
Because you can't bypass the.
Because you can't bypass the stomach. But you can buy smarter supplements. So if you buy supplements that are called lipospheric, the term lipo is fat and sphere is a ball, right? So they have a way to process this now, which is really cool, that you put the substance inside a ball of fat. And fat doesn't get digested until it gets into your small intestine. Your gallbladder, if you still have one, will squirt bile salts, which is the breakdown of red blood cells, which is a really neat process that happens. But your body will secrete bile salts into the gut, and that will dissolve away the ball of fat. So then glutathione's in there. And with liposomal glutathione, liposomal magnesium threonate, and liposomal vitamin C, you can get, I've seen studies where you can get up to 80% of the nutrient into your blood that way. So there's better ways to do it.
But like you said, give yourself the building blocks so your body can make the glutathione.
That's right. That's right. And if we have an issue like a thyroid or a heart, like if we have high blood pressure and we want to deal with that, I think it's really important to say that your body needs time and repetition for all of it, right? So you take somebody with high blood pressure, the studies that I've seen, it's anywhere from 4 to 6 months of taking trimethylglycine because your body's still making, right? But then we're taking a substance and we're trying to metabolize that out. And so it's kind of like, as it's building up, we want to try to decrease it as well. So it takes time and repetition to get it there. And I think that's a really important thing with all the health things that we're talking about today, is that one time is great, a couple times is good, but it needs to be a lifestyle. And I have a phrase that I use quite often that is decades over days. That hit me one time. It's like, man, if we can think in the terms of what is this going to look like for the next decade, rather than what is it going to look like tomorrow, that changes our whole approach on things. What does it look like when we're getting adjusted for a decade? You might be getting pretty close.
More than that.
Well, from me.
Yeah.
Yeah, from me though, but that's great. So what does that look like? Does your life look better if you've been getting adjusted for a decade? Or does it look better if you go for just a couple days? Does my life look better if I'm in the gym for a decade? or does it look better if I'm there sporadically and intermittently, right? Same thing with supplementation, same things with sleep, same things with toxins. It's decades over days is really one thing that I think is important to promote. I think you guys probably know this about me, but I can ramble for about a lot for a long time. So I want to maybe park it here